Armand, it's been way too long, and it's all my fault. I apologize, but I'm glad to have you back on the show to talk about a film that turned 50 last year. It's Steven Spielberg's The Sugarland Express. Now, you may wonder, folks out there, and Armand even, why I chose Sugarland Express. Well, I've never seen it before, and it's a Spielberg blind spot for me. And of course, Armand, we started talking about Spielberg movies 5 years ago. Can you believe it? With the release of your book, Make Spielberg Great Again.
Hey,
Um, yes, which folks, pick it up. It's a great read. In fact, Armand, before we get into the meat of the show, I was having breakfast with a friend and colleague of mine, Jeff York of The Establishing Shot, this morning. We were talking about movies and Spielberg, and I mentioned that I was going to be talking to you about Sugarland Express, and he said, because I mentioned, you wrote about it in Make Spielberg Great Again. He said, I love that book.
oh
He's a
wow,
fan of your work. Yeah,
that's very.
shout out to Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yep. Um, but yeah, I'm excited to talk about this because, as I mentioned, I'd never seen this film before. I watched half of it last night, half of it this morning. Yes, I crammed my homework in, and I was not ready for the Sugarland Express, and I can't believe that this was his first Spielberg's first like feature film for the big screen. He'd done Duel, but that was a TV movie. So jumping up onto the big screen, it's quite a leap, and for several reasons we'll get into. I was just surprised several times throughout this movie. I think it's a fantastic film, and I'm excited to talk to you about it. And also, the context of 1974, which you have referred to as a golden year for cinema. And in our correspondence leading up to this, you listed out a number of films that came out in this year, and I had never really sat back to think about how much great cinema we got, in that particular year. So we're going to get into all of it. First, how you doing, Armand?
I'm doing well, thank the Lord. I'm okay. We're still here. Still hopeful.
Excellent. Well, all right. So let me start off by the way that we usually start these, which was, you are a Spielberg fan going way back, but this was his first, film, his first, I guess, proper feature. How did you come to it? Did you have any context of Duel? And did you have any expectations coming from that movie into this feature? Did you discover this later after you'd already kind of seen some other Spielberg's work, or were you right there at the forefront?
I was there when it happened, in the room where it happened, as they say. I was right there. As the anthology "Make Spielberg Great Again" says, uh, this is where this is where the story began with Spielberg. I was writing reviews for my college paper, the South End at Wayne State University in Detroit, and I had been doing that. I had been doing that since '72. So it's part of my regular routine to go to press screenings, Detroit press screenings, as a regular thing. And it was a wonderful period to be able to go to new movies that way, and especially at that time, it was a wonderful period for American films, for all films, but especially for American films. So I went to see the Sugarland Express with no expectations. It was just another movie I was going to see, and I don't believe I had any exposure to any Spielberg work before that, except maybe for one of his TV movies, the Night Gallery film with Joan Crawford. Uh, there is a kind of post Exorcist TV movie called something something evil with Sandy Dennis. So that's all. That was all I had seen. I had not seen Duel, but that was those other two TV films were the only Spielberg I had known. But I didn't have any particular attachment to the name. He was just another person who was making TV movies. So as part of my regular routine of reviewing films for my college paper, I went to see Sugarland Express, and it was an amazing thing to behold. Part of the amazement, of course, is my longtime fascination with widescreen movies, widescreen cinema. It wasn't exactly what we call a cinema scope, but there was something like that aspect ratio, that wide aspect kind of a rectangular aspect ratio, which to me is the best way for movies to be presented. And Sugarland Express is one of them. So I'm sitting there, and it's not like watching Something Evil or Night Gallery on television. I was watching in real cinema, real widescreen cinema, my favorite kind of cinema. And from the moment it started, it was obviously the work of a very skilled filmmaker, and it was love ever since. But anyway, that was the beginning. That was the beginning of Make Spielberg Great Again, right there.
Let me ask about this whole widescreen thing, because one of the earliest shots in the movie, we open with Goldie Hawn getting off a bus with some bags and kind of trudging through this, kind of desolate area, and we see her walking to the left into the frame, and as we pan out, we realize she's being framed within sort of the brick, almost marquee of a correctional facility, and it occurs to me now that that might have been a square presentation, the kind of the 4:3, but then we're moving out of that, it's being absorbed into the full widescreen. Do you think that was some kind of a commentary about breaking out of television and going into the movies?
Could well be. Widescreen being my favorite format, he was, I would say, I feel he was born to make movies, but he's certainly born to make real cinema without the confines of the TV box frame, and to
Yeah.
use the cinematic widescreen frame properly, so that vision becomes part of the true part of the cinematic experience and can be appreciated as such. Uh,
And
well, I was going to
well,
say,
there's so much. Oh,
it's
good.
it's. Well, I was going to say is Sugar and Express is often referred to as Spielberg's first film, simply because it was his first theatrical release. Obviously, he had done those TV movies before, and it's kind of fun to say that it's his first film because it kind of hooks him up with Orson Welles, who also made a theatrical debut at a young age. I believe Spielberg was 24 at the time, I think. So that's a wonderful thing to say, even though he had had experience through his television work. But here was an official theatrical debut that was really marvelous and really the sign of a true filmmaker and a talented filmmaker. So that was all wonderful to behold for, shall we say, the first time.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like um, novelists. Stephen King wrote several, short stories and novels and things, but then he wrote Carrie, and that's his first like big published work. So he was a novelist leading up to that, but it wasn't until he was published and widely recognized that, oh, his first book was Carrie. I'm sure there were other things that he had put together. Spielberg, yes, his I guess sketches ended up on television, and in Night Gallery and TV movies, but I feel there's sort of a connection there. But what a debut! One of the first things I want to talk about, as far as my surprises, was William Atherton, who plays Clovis. Now
Mhm.
he is serving. He's got 4 months left in this kind of correctional facility, and his wife, played by Goldie Hawn, plays Lou Jean. She comes to break him out of this facility, even though he's only got 4 months left on his term, because she has just gotten out of jail, and the state has decided to take their young child, Langston, and
Right,
place
Baby
them in
Langston.
with yeah, baby Langston, place them with a foster family. They just decided to do that, and it happened. And she was like, "No, we're going to go get our son, who's living in Sugarland, Texas. We're just going to go take him." And she breaks her husband out. It's not exactly a breakout. There's a kind of a social, visitors day kind of thing, and they sneak out. It's very funny, but William Atherton, I have only known him playing movie villains in things like Ghostbusters, Die Hard, Real Genius, of course, where he's the kind of the buttoned up establishment goon. To see him play a 25-year-old convict with a heart of gold, to see him laugh and smile in a way that is not utterly sinister, was a revelation. And I wondered, much like Spielberg's later career, what might have been had he decided to lean into the kind of all-American guy who's got a, maybe a little bit troubled, but ultimately a decent human being, because he's amazing in this movie.
Sure, he's a superb actor. I think this was his debut as well. And 1974, this was his moment. Not only being introduced to cinema, but it was his moment as an actor. He had gotten this lead role in Sugarland Express, and then he followed that the next year with the lead role in John Schlesinger's Day of the Locust. I think a really superb actor. I'm glad you appreciated his performance here. I think his performance in Day of the Locust is also kind of wonderful. Uh, I recall at the time thinking that in Day of the Locust, where he plays the, based on the Hollywood novel by Nathaniel West, he plays the Nathaniel West figure, and an Ivy League graduate who comes to Hollywood to be a designer, but he's struck by how people live in Hollywood, people on the outskirts of Hollywood, as well as the jaded, corrupt professionals in the film industry. And it's a role where he has to contemplate his life and has to contemplate morality. And at the time, I thought he's as good in William Atherton is as good in Day of the Locust as Al Pacino was in The Godfather. That's how impressed I was. But that impression also started with the Sugarland Express, which is a different kind of characterization. But I guess I'm making the point that he's an excellent actor, and he played both of those roles really well. Those roles are the highlights of his career. These are his first two films, but you know of him for his later work, where his career was less lucky. But he started out with a bang. In Sugarland Express and Day of the Locust.
Now, I have not seen Day of the Locust.
Mm.
And you said it came out in 75, so
25 the next
maybe
year.
that's you know what? That's 50 this year. I think we might have to talk Day of the Locust because yeah, Hollywood, morality, that sounds like something we could really get into.
It's
Um,
very it's a very it
I
has become a very timely film because it's about the corruption and destruction of Hollywood, and a large part of it is uh, the Atherton character's name is Todd Hackett. I said it before, he was a designer, but he's also a painter, and that movie hinges on the idea of him doing a portrait of what he feels about Hollywood, and it's called the painting is called Hollywood on Fire, and it's kind of a prophetic vision of what will occur and what will happen to Hollywood. So it happens to be rather timely, actually. So we can talk about that if you
well,
like at some later date.
I would I would love it. I'm putting it on the list.
Okay.
Um, so, and I mentioned Goldie Hawn plays Lou Jean. I, I don't have much context for Goldie Hawn. I think I more know her daughter's work, Kate Hudson. I was too young to appreciate Private Benjamin. I never really got on that whole thing, and I hadn't considered her as an actress. But she gives another great and often grating but endearing performance in this movie. And
Yeah.
even though she's a sympathetic character, she kind of is the catalyst for all the disaster and the bad things that happen, including the tragic demise of her husband. Spoiler alert. What did you make of Lou Jean as a character and Goldie Hawn's performance here?
Uh, the wonderful Goldie Hawn, who, for my generation, she started out as a TV comedian on a TV comedy show called Laugh-In,
Hmm.
and her career surprised everyone because she went directly from Laugh-In to her first movie, a film called Cactus Flower, which is based on a Broadway farce, and she won an Academy Award for her first film, which uh, which is a tribute to her talent. Although many people at the time were stunned that she would win an Oscar for playing essentially a dumb blonde character, but I not to get off on it, but I often remember seeing a TV program where a bunch of Hollywood people were sitting around talking about the Oscars, and the veteran actress from the 40s and 50s named Nina Foch was the only one to defend Goldie Hawn winning the Oscar for Cactus Flower, because she said that is acting. That's exactly what acting is. She didn't think Goldie Hawn was a dumb blonde. She thought she was a good actress. So that's 1969, and Goldie Hawn made several unmemorable comedies after that. But then in '74, she comes out in *Sugarland Express*, which is really her first serious role, her first dramatic role in a film, and she hits it out of the park. The way she plays Lugene, there is some of the Goldie Hawn charm, but she plays Lugene, as you well put it, as a very grating personality, because she keeps pushing Clovis beyond the things that he wants to do, but she pushes him because you can plainly see Goldie Hawn shows her to be an attractive and at times charming woman, but also a kind of dangerous woman, because she's so single minded that she's going to have her way despite what anybody else thinks. And it's kind of an original characterization, and she pulls it off. She pulls it off beautifully. One of the things that's most impressive about Sugarland Express is the period in which it appeared. It came out in 1974, but it was also in the line of films that descended from the Lovers on the Lamb road movie that was the main feature of this Renaissance period in American cinema, that started with Bonnie and Clyde, story of lovers on the lamb who also happened to be criminals, bank robbers and criminals. And then you had a film like Pretty Poison with Anthony Perkins and Tuesday Weld the year following that. Then the year following that, you had the breakthrough film Easy Rider, that changed the way Hollywood thought of financing movies and the kinds of younger filmmakers who would bring new ideas into American cinema. Uh, so I'm trying to trace the path of the American Road movie in that period, and Sugarland Express is part of that as well. In 1974, Sugarland Express is one of three significant American road movies. Uh, there's Sugarland Express, there's Robert Altman's Thieves Like Us, there's also Terrence Malick's Badlands. So Sugarland Express is in that road movie tradition, and these are all superb and impressive films. The Sugarland Express no less than the other two. Uh, Spielberg's first film, I guess it's Terrence Malick's first film as well, but they're both impressive enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with the great Robert Altman in Thieves Like Us. So, so you have this great genre of the American road movie, and the Sugarland Express fits into that genre because it's also the road movie itself is a genre that's about people discovering America, as the new young Hollywood filmmakers of that era were also discovering what made the United States of America and its people the way they are, especially at that period where the nation was so divided politically. The American Road movie of that period is fascinating because it brings that division into focus by usually giving us characters who are uh, improper, are doing something criminal, and they're on the road. They're moving from one place to another, not just geographically, certainly geographically, but also moving from one place to another spiritually, morally. And the Sugarland Express holds to those ideas of the Hollywood road movie of that period. And part of those ideas is that we're presented with complex characters. I'm trying to jump from Goldie Hawn, the TV comedian, jumping into a very serious dramatic role. She's playing a very complex person, Lugene Clovis, and part of this complication is what made the road movie so special. I have to pause a minute and also mention how the American road movie, starting with Bonnie and Clyde, is a direct descendant of Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless, which is another Lovers on the Lamb type film. It's a French movie, of course, but it's a French movie inspired by American crime films. So this is where the moral questions in the American road movies of the 60s and 70s got their impetus from Godard's Breathless. Because what you have in Breathless, you have a presentation of characters who make demands on our sense of what is morally correct and what is psychologically disturbing, because the heroes of these road movies, are criminals. And as audiences watch these movies about criminals, the audience is forced to examine its own morality, its own sense of right and wrong, as well as its own try to come to terms with its own understanding of what it is like to live in a divided nation, in a nation where morality has been tossed into the air, where political issues have people puzzled. And so the American Road Movie offers that. Sugarland Express is one of them, and one of the reasons Sugarland Express works so well is because William Atherton is very good, but also Goldie Hawn presents an absolutely complex character in the road movie
You know,
tradition.
and the other, I agree with all of that. And I think it's fascinating. I want to ask you a kind of a, I guess, a hypothetical question. Is there another genre besides crime that in which a road movie would really work? Because I keep thinking about all the examples that you've mentioned, and as you've discussed, they all involve people kind of on the lam being pursued by cops. It's a fantastic setup because you are being chased and being chased relentlessly. You got the open road connected, connecting states, and or even just like the wide area, wide open spaces of Texas. So there is an inherent motivating force propelling the story. I guess I'm wondering, why do they always have to be crime films? Is it they're all trying to say something about America, culture, politics, or is it just it's the easiest genre to get people moving and not stopping until usually someone's dead?
Well, I guess you can say in terms of providing action. Uh, so much of Hollywood depends on selling action to audiences, and because American audiences, are not accustomed to going to movies and watching people simply talk. They want to see movement. They want to see action, and so that's good enough reason to justify the road movie becoming a, a constantly a constantly created genre during the 1970s. But also, it's a fascinating genre because its history goes back even beyond Breathless. It starts. I would say that you could say that it starts with the Grapes of Wrath. It's and in that sense, the American Road Movie is a quintessential tale about American aspiration, about Americans responding to changes in their culture, changes in their society, and as part of that response, they have to uproot themselves and move from one place to another. In a sense, retracing the idea of the founding of the United States of America, where there was this push towards from the East Coast to the West Coast of new Americans looking for something. Just as in the Grapes of Wrath, you have the Joad family escaping the Dust Bowl from Oklahoma and moving out to California, and that becomes a quintessential story that was especially well told in the early part of the 20th century by John Steinbeck in his novel, and then in that quite superb John Ford film from 1940 with Henry Fonda and Jane Darwell. So we start with the Grapes of Wrath, where you have Americans essentially on that road trip out west to the west, and that becomes a quintessential story. And then that quintessential story is picked up in the 1950s by Jack Kerouac's On the Road, where Americans who are not part of the mainstream, Americans who are disenchanted with the kind of lifestyles they were born into and grew up with, and were looking for something different, looking for answers to their questions about the state of the nation, and they take to the road in order to pursue that. They get on Route 66, which becomes the kind of main vein of travel and movement in this moral, spiritual, and political pursuit of the American road movie. Uh, Jean-Luc Godard knew that and could intuit it from the American crime films of the 1950s, and he gave us then the quintessential characters of the American road movie by presenting that story in the form of a romance between a man and a woman, and often this figure taken from American crime films means that the man is often a patsy for a femme fatale. But and there are some variations that would be wrought on that, uh, as Breathless was emulated by American filmmakers afterwards. But essentially, that's what it is. So it's coming from Grapes of Wrath, coming from Kerouac's On the Road, coming from Breathless, and then and coming from Bonnie and Clyde, and then in the '70s you get these three films in the same year about lovers on the lam, uh, revealing what America is like in the 1970s. Even though Badlands set in the
Now,
'50s, it feels like the '70s.
I have seen Badlands. I have not seen the Altman film that you mentioned.
Yeah,
Um,
Thieves Like Us. Set in the
okay.
'30s, but it feels like the '70s in terms of how the characters respond to the state of the nation.
Well, it occurs to me, I was struck by, and this happens a lot when I watch older films, from the 1970s in particular. Sugarland Express is rated PG,
Mhm.
which, if you just look at the box art or something and see the rating, you think, oh, this is a family film. It's not. This is a very adult movie, and I was very surprised that it was a Spielberg film. Perhaps I shouldn't have been, because I think I've been colored by the movies that he would kind of make later, very much kind of family friendly films. This is a movie for adults about real world adult themes, and it's also pretty harsh in a lot of ways. Particularly the end. I spoiled it by saying that Clovis gets shot in the back, and he proceeds to drive several miles with his guts, essentially bleeding out, and the cop next to him trying to stuff the wound with paper towels. I mean, it's rough, and it's harrowing, and it was frankly upsetting to me, because I guess I was surprised by the fact that he got shot. I'm jumping ahead in the story, but there's a setup where Clovis, Lugene, and their hostage, Maxwell, Maxwell Slide, who's a sheriff's deputy. Yep. They end up on this road trip together. He's the hostage, but they gradually become something resembling friends, and there's bonding and sort of a breakdown of the law versus criminal relationship. So they really do kind of get to care about each other. At the end, the three of them are pulling up to the house of the foster family where baby Langston is, except Langston has been moved to the courthouse, like down the road, and in the place of the family are two or three, like, good old boy sharpshooters with rifles ready to take them out. Very much in the vein of the Wild Bunch. We'll get back to Ben Johnson in a minute. But when Clovis goes up to the house, again prompted by Lugene, who's hysterical in the back of the car, screaming for her baby, who she's certain is inside. She said, I hear him crying, I hear him crying, which is impossible because he's in another part of town. Clovis essentially gets out of the car, walks up to the house, turns around to go back to the car, and then they shoot him in the back. I was so hopeful that he was going to make it back to the car unharmed, that when he's essentially gunned down on that front porch, it was, again, it was upsetting, and very surprising to me. And I was thinking, wow, if anyone shows this movie to their kids and they get this far into it, that there's going to be some hard conversations and probably a lot of tears being wiped away.
Well, your shock is a good thing, and your shock is a proper response to the film, I think. Uh, but we have to say, or I feel like I have to say, that your shock is simply it's a millennial response. Uh, During the
Hey, I'm
1970s,
Gen X. I'm Gen X, buddy. Okay.
well, I'm not, not putting you down for it, but but your surprise is the surprise of this current period in our culture. Uh, in 1974, uh, before the cultural change that took place later, uh, Sugarland Express is not exactly a family movie, but it's not an adult film either. I think it being a Steven Spielberg film, there's a good balance of entertainment and humor and drama in it as well. Uh, And I dare say that in the 1970s, it wasn't just it wasn't simply that the movies were better then. It's also that the audiences were better than back then,
Yes.
because the audiences were accustomed to serious filmmaking, uh, and so audiences were. I mean, let's remember or think about it this way. This is the audience that has seen Bonnie and Clyde. This is the audience that has seen films like They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Films like Patton, films like MASH. Uh, and so there's a certain kind of serious expectation of audiences, even younger audiences. I would dare say that the family movies of that period were not as puerile as they are now, or as adolescent films are now. So one would expect a film from that era, from 1974, to offer entertainment values, but also offer something to think about, also offer something that would be moving. Uh, the American road movie genre almost always ends in tragedy. So in that sense, Sugarland Express would not be surprising. But the shock that you felt, the emotion that you felt afterward, is would have to be a tribute to the effectiveness of the filmmaking, wherein you're made to respond to these characters and to care for them, or simply to feel their circumstances and respond to them as human beings, so that when the inevitable tragedy finally occurs, it's got some punch to it. The way it did at the end of Breathless, the way it did at the end of Bonnie and Clyde, and also at the end of Sugarland Express. It's almost a ritualistic, tragic ending in a sense, because that pursuit, especially when that road pursuit is made by people who break the law, uh, it's got to end badly, and but you're made to feel the weight of that ending and the necessity of that ending, the purpose of that ending, of that kind of ending. So it's good, even though you may have expected a Spielberg to make a family movie. Uh, I am happy to say that in his debut theatrical films, he did not make a juvenile film. He made a film that can be respected in serious ways.
Yeah, for sure. And I think part of it, and this is something I had forgotten until the very last moments of the movie, where we get the kind of end title cards before the credits. I had forgotten that this was, and I haven't looked into it, but this was based on a true story, apparently.
Right.
Um, I'm not sure how much was adjusted for it, but typically in movies that have these kind of tragic endings, uh, like with Bonnie and Clyde, both people get it. You know,
Mm.
both of the assailants are either arrested or they're gunned down. In this movie, Clovis gets shot and he dies eventually, but Lugene she gets arrested, and according to the postscript, she served some time. It was like 14 months out of a 5-year sentence. And then when she got out, she actually won custody of baby Langston, and they went to live on happily ever after. So it's this great blend of a sad ending with a bit of an uplifting note. That the closest I can think of is the ending of True Romance, which ends on this bloody hotel suite gunfight where Christian Slater gets his eyes shot out, and he and Alabama drive away, and you don't know what's going to happen to them. But then they have a little post thing where they're on a beach some years later with a little toddler, and that great Hans Zimmer score comes up. Uh, I don't know if. Was it Tony Scott was thinking of this movie back then, but you can see the kind of the reverberations throughout time. And one thing I want to ask you about: why isn't Sugarland Express more talked about in terms of the wider cinematic achievement that it is, but certainly in terms of Spielberg? I mean, everyone talks about the big ones: E.T., Jaws, Jurassic Park. Why not Sugarland Express? Is it too different from what he would come to do later?
Well, kind of different, but also people don't talk about it because of the degradation of film culture. I'm sorry to say, uh, people don't talk about older movies anymore, which part of the reason why I'm happy to have this discussion with you, because these are part of our it's part of our heritage, and these are films that should not be forgotten. Films like Sugarland Express and Thieves Like Us and Badlands should not be forgotten. But film discussion itself has degraded, and so I think that's the simple answer. Uh, you could complicate the answer by saying that maybe part of the reason is because of films and filmmakers like Tony Scott and Quentin Tarantino, who did True Romance. And True Romance, in my view, degrades the American road movie and turns it into something that's kind of pernicious and ridiculous and merely violent with no feeling in it. Uh,
That's
just
why I love
merely,
it, Armand.
just when I know, but see what they've done to you, which is what they've done to us. They've degraded our great cinematic culture. That's what they've done to us. And but Spielberg, before the bad turn in 2008 or thereabouts, uh, would make movies that are complex that way. Uh, Sugarland Express is wonderful for its complexity. The complexity meaning that there is humor in it, but there's also a vision or at least a perception of what's rich in American life, in American culture, the different kinds of people that exist here in this country, and even their different responses to public events, national events, which is demonstrated as the Poplins are on the road. That complexity is in this film, as that complexity is in all of the great Spielberg films. Um, One another point I wanted to make about the complexity of the Sugarland Express is that let's not forget uh, the young policeman Slide, played by an actor named Michael Sachs. Michael
Where
Sachs,
where did he go? He was tremendous in this movie. I'd never seen him before, and I don't think I'd seen him since.
I can't think of what he did after that either. But before this, he appeared in the lead role of Slaughterhouse Five, which is George Roy Hill's film version of the Kurt Vonnegut novel, which at one point was like standard reading in high schools and junior high
Oh,
schools in America for the way it depicted responses to World War II, responses to war in general, and I believe that Sugarland. I'm sorry, Slaughterhouse Five was Michael Sachs's film debut. So he goes from Slaughterhouse Five, which is a movie based on the Vonnegut novel, as I said, which means it's a movie that takes a kind of satirical perspective on American ideals, and as Vonnegut is wont to do. And so Michael Sachs brings a little of that, I think, into the Sugarland Express. If we are cinema-minded viewers, this is Michael Sachs from Slaughterhouse Five in this movie with Goldie Hawn all of a sudden, and but there's a kind of satirical perspective on American life in Sugarland Express as well, which is part of what makes it complex, which is part of what makes it a kind of sophisticated family movie, if you will. But it's part of the kind of sophisticated entertainment that Spielberg was always capable of, and certainly did create until the turn came.
well, and he's again. I'm surprised by when I first saw him on screen. I thought it was a young William Forsythe because they kind of have the same facial features, but Forsythe would have been 19 in 1974. But it's the chemistry that these three leads. I know Ben Johnson, I think, is credited as the second lead in this movie, and again, we'll get back to him. But between the hostage deputy, sheriff's deputy, and our two criminals, by the end of the film, you really do feel that they care about each other, and that is a friendship that is formed out of a hostage situation and evolves over the course of this almost 2 hours. There's nothing that feels like they skipped several beats. You see this, it's a grudging relationship that's formed between these three, so that by the end, he's happy to get out of that car and go back to his regular life, being a cop. He's glad that he didn't get, shot, because these two not insanely bright people almost got him killed several times. But you also get the sense in the sheer poetry of the last shot, where over the end credits, he's just standing out there by the river. It's a very golden river. He's shot almost completely in silhouette. It reminded me of something Spielberg would do later in Raiders with Indiana Jones atop the pyramid with the workers, except instead of a golden river, it's the golden sun. But just watching him kind of sitting there, you imagine him, he's just thinking about this crazy couple of days that he's had. What's he going to do with his life? Is he going to go back to this girlfriend that he had? And also, how does he feel about this guy that had been his friend who was just massacred, and this other girl that kind of brought him out of his shell and taught him about the humanity of these two criminals. They're no longer just people that he's got to chase down. They're people with a capital P. What does he think about all that? That's all encapsulated in the last couple of minutes of this movie. And it's a real reason to just stick around through the end credits, because it's almost like a musical overture in the beginning of a film to kind of get you prepped for what you're about to see. It's this moment of meditation at the end to make you sit and think about what you just watched.
Well, yeah, that's well put. The moment of meditation also, I think, is necessary, and is I think the sign of a great filmmaker who understands that a great filmmaker whose sensibility cannot simply end at the moment of tragedy, like Bonnie and Clyde, which is a great ending for different reasons. But Spielberg's sensibility is different from Arthur Penn's, and so you need that moment of contemplation, that moment of rest after the tragic moment, and so that's what Spielberg gives you with that golden composition, river composition at the end of the film, a moment of contemplation. Also a different kind of a slightly different kind of visual image than we saw throughout the rest of the film, which is basically highway shots and cars on asphalt. Another tribute to cinematographer Vilmos Zsigmond, the great Vilmos Zsigmond, who would do Close Encounters with Spielberg, but also before that had done McCabe and Mrs. Miller for Robert Altman and Deliverance for John Borman. So you got a great cinematographer helping Spielberg out here. And so that in visual terms, the movie is really a superbly composed, superbly put together. Yeah, that moment of rest at the end is quite necessary, but also it's not just an effect, because it ties in with the three different personalities of Clovis, Lugene, and Slide. And remember, just before Clovis gets out of the car and walks towards his death, it's Slide who's telling him, "Don't get out of the car," if I remember correctly. He's warning him,
Yeah,
because well, these are the three young people in the story, and in that car we have three different responses to America, even though it's not so simple as a movie about the generational differences between the characters. And here I'm kind of thinking of the Ben Johnson figure. But it's a smart enough film to understand that even among the younger generation, there are different ways to respond to the country. And Lugene, Clovis, and Slide represent three different responses, even though they're all young people. And so I guess I'm saying that that moment of contemplation at the end is consistent with who Slide is as a person.
Well, it's you mentioned the kind of the warning. The warning actually starts a little bit before that, because they pull up to the house and they pass the house and then they kind of go around the side of it,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a sense that something's wrong. And Slide, when they stop and Lugene is telling Clovis to go get their kid, Slide's like, this your kid is not in there. And he senses that something's wrong. I think he picks up on the fact that all throughout this crazy road trip, there have been crowds of people wherever they've gone, but the neighborhood is mysteriously absent of folks.
Right.
So he senses there's a setup, but he's not quite sure. And he just says, look, we can just keep going, turn yourselves in, we can figure this out. And just, leave your kid behind, essentially. He's not here. When you talk about filmmaking, there are two moments that I want to touch on so that I don't forget about them. One, there's an absolutely magical shot that is completely out of context. From my perception, the context comes a few minutes later, but in the moment, it's so jarring. We cut from a night scene to a morning of the next morning, we're all of a sudden inside a garage, and we can see the rising sun in the background just over the horizon. Again, all the characters in this scene are filmed in silhouette. We see a car with what looks like, a police light on the top of it, and it's just people packing guns, rifles, ammunition into this truck. And then we cut to a scene on the street where they're pulling out and realize these aren't cops; these are vigilantes, and they're going to go hunt for the Clovis for
Poplins.
the Poplins.
Hmm.
Yes, and I just thought to myself, this is Spielberg is a filmmaker who knew, and I'm sure he worked with Zygmunt on this, knew exactly the shot that he wanted, and knew that there was one time of day that he could get this shot, and had to have everything set up so you can get the sun in the sky at that moment. It looked like it was done in a oneer, but I thought to myself, where are the filmmakers today who are really thinking about the environment, thinking about how they can use nature, the circumstances to tell great stories and get great shots? Because yeah, it's a magical moment. And again, we don't have hand holding of someone saying, meanwhile, there are a whole bunch of people, vigilantes getting ready to track these folks down. We have to be patient with the movie and trust that we're going to be explained who these folks are and what they're doing, all in due course. And it sort of amplifies the horror of it, because we realize, oh my gosh, the people we've been tracking are in real danger. The cops have brought out sharpshooters. They were told to stand down because Captain Tanner, played by the great Ben Johnson, said that a 90% success rate of the sharpshooters taking out Clovis and Lugene in a somewhat crowded town area was not enough of a certainty for him. So he called off the sharpshooters, like, nope, don't do it. Then we contrast that with these vigilantes who track down our threesome who have holed up in a used car lot. They've disguised the police car under a for sale sign, taken up residence in this RV, um, while they decide, they get some shut eye. They decide which car they're going to steal so they can abandon the cop car and get away. Um, this place gets blown to hell. These vigilantes don't care about anything except nailing their targets. And they even have a young, like, teenage boy with them who it seems like, oh, we're going to teach you to be a man today, son. He freaks out once the action starts and he runs away. he's the only one with any damn sense in the whole scene. But that shootout where they're running and ducking around cars, things are kind of blowing up. There's people getting blown back by the sheer effect of these blasts. It was tense, and I can't think of any parallels except maybe some of the scenes in No Country for Old Men. But I know I shouldn't have probably been surprised by Clovis getting shot in the back, but do I have a right to have been stunned by this masterful car lot scene?
Sure. I say sure because, well, I say sure because it's the middle '70s. The Vietnam War is still going on, and Americans are concerned with the idea of violence, uh, the idea of combat, the idea of warfare, uh, the kinds of occurrences that that could be analogous to warfare, but they happen in America. But the violence that happens in that car lot, it always struck me as consistent with the kind of fearful vision of violence that Sam Peckinpah apotheosized in The Wild Bunch.
Which
And
also featured
so
Ben Johnson. Yeah.
it featured Ben Johnson as well. And so it makes nothing but sense. It's not far fetched, and it works. It works emotionally. It works narratively, but emotionally, it works in a very strong way that is consistent with the ideas that are churning throughout the country. How do we deal with violence? This is also how do we respond to violence, I should say. This is also the period where, right after the rating system came in, where film goers and filmmakers are also concerned about how much violence they can depict in a film and how effective will it be. And and the violence is meant to have an impact, to have an effect in the Sugarland Express, different from the kind of effect that violence is meant to have decades later in degraded films like True Romance, where the violence is meant to be funny. Violence should never simply be funny, especially when life is endangered by violence. Of course, from Kurosawa's Yojimbo, we know that violence can be also done with with some wit and humor. But the idea is that we are dealing with the occurrence of violence in the world, and Spielberg has absorbed that concern from Peckinpah, from the Vietnam War, and it can be felt in Sugarland Express in that moment.
Well, I think there's the night before in the RV, or actually no, there's the night before and then also the morning right before that fight breaks out. There's a moment of great foreshadowing, and there's also a moment that feels like foreshadowing, but it ends up being a rug pull. The parking lot is right across the street from a drive-in theater, and Clovis and Lugene end up cuddling in the bed watching Roadrunner cartoons from across the lot, and they're giggling and having a good kind of childlike time. But at one point, we see the image of the drive-in screen reflected in the glass, and we see Clovis watching it, and it's the moment where the Roadrunner, I think he runs off a cliff or he falls down a canyon, and he just goes splat, and you see the look on William Atherton's face just go cold, almost like he's got a vision of, you know what, sometimes things don't work out for people
Right.
who are on the run. But then, so that's the great bit of foreshadowing, because of course we know what happens to him at the end of the film. But the next morning, he invites Slide into the trailer to use the bathroom and also to shave. And at one point, he's talking about, Clovis says, after this is all over, I think I'd like to join the highway patrol. And Slide looks at him incredulously, says, I'm pretty sure they're not going to take someone with a record. And parenthetically, certainly not yours. But they're talking about, Slide said, what if this is just kind of the end of the road? What if, you guys left without me, or are you going to kill me? This could get very bad. And they decide that they're just going to keep on moving and they're not going to kill Slide. Shortly thereafter, all the violence breaks out with the vigilantes. And I think we're meant to think that Slide's life is in danger, that they might kill him and pin it on our two criminals, and then that makes everyone's situation worse. Fortunately, they don't. Everybody gets away. But in that moment, I'm just waiting for him to get one in the back. I don't know if that's because I've seen too many movies where that has been the route that the filmmakers have taken, or if it's just that, effect of what Spielberg did here. But did you expect, if you can cast your mind back 51 years, did you expect Slide to make it out of that parking lot?
Oh, I don't believe I ever put myself ahead of the story. I was just following it as it was
Mm.
given to me, and accepting what I'm given and trying to make sense of what I'm given. I never I never suspected. I didn't forecast the future in it. Uh, just waited to see how it unfolded. But one of the but your points are good, are well taken. One of the marvelous things about the movie is that moment, that exchange between Slide and Clovis, and once again another presentation of how different personalities, different perspectives come together in this story. Uh, you know, Spielberg's realization, and also I guess you could say, the realization of the screenwriters, Hal Barwood and Matthew Robbins, that America is full of different personalities, different types, different experiences, and when they come together, it's rather a beautiful thing to see, because then people can exchange their empathy for each other, their understanding of each other. That's one of the things that makes the road movie so beautiful, because you have characters who encounter people unlike themselves, or people who think differently than themselves. Uh, Not that crazy stuff people talk about today. I need I need to be seen, and I need to see people like me. The road movie is so beautiful, such a beautiful genre, because it's people who are not like me who come together and understand each other. Uh, So Blue Jean's different from Clovis. Clovis is different from Slide. They're all different from each other, but they come to understand and care for each other as human beings. Beautiful.
And it is, and I think it's interesting that Captain Tanner, he also, he's a man of the law, and you get the feeling that he's a man of his word. And when he has to kind of violate the promise that he's going to let our trio go, the movie begins, or not begins, but the action, the catalyst is police car chase going after this stolen cop vehicle. More police engage, more police engage, and eventually you end up with just parades of people going down the interstate chasing this cop car. And there's a lot of car crashes and a lot of, we don't know how many casualties there are. We imagine there's at least a couple of those two cops with the brand new green cars that we see and then we don't see ever again. But eventually there's a sort of a bond that says, okay, we're gonna follow you, but we're not going to interfere with you. We're gonna let you go to Sugarland and get your son. And they said, no fooling, no fooling. But then they break the promise, and Clovis and Lugene were kind of, I think, foolhardy to trust that this cop could keep his word. But we get the sense that Tanner is really hurt by the fact that he has no choice but to put these folks down because they will not listen. They're not going to go quietly, and they certainly can't be allowed to, kidnap. Even though it is their son, the law has said that their son now belongs with his other family. So it's very complex. And again, it's not something that's done in these hand-wringing, overly dramatic, overly long monologues. Most of it is done with expressions of remorse or disappointment on Johnson's face, a few words here and there with his deputy. I love the way he dealt with the vigilantes, because they think that he would naturally be on their side because they're all just trying to get the bad guys. But he's like, no, you guys are idiots. Look what you've done to this car lot. Go away. Arrest these people. He's the fourth of a great complex character. This movie is filled with rich characters. Even the scene towards the end where they're almost at Sugarland and they stop through this small town where there's hordes of people greeting them, shoving 6-packs of beer and a baby pig into the car, congratulating them on being these great outlaws, seeing signs saying we're all Poplins now. You mentioned the Vietnam War. I imagine it sort of struck me almost like as a homecoming parade for soldiers, although it didn't quite work out that same way in terms of Vietnam. Not so much sending flowers as spittle, but they don't dwell on that either, but it only takes pretty much one pretty brief scene to see how their escapades have affected, people who see an intrusion of big government or government overreach. And these folks, even though they are criminals and outlaws, they're bucking the system in a way that, these folks who just are trying to live their day-to-day lives, they probably can't. So they see it as representative of something bigger than they are, even if they don't quite understand the full ramifications of what they're asking. They're asking these outlaws to go and perform a kidnapping and engage in, probably a lot of car accidents, injuries, and violence in the pursuit of sticking it to the man. There's so many layers to this movie that, when I harped on the PG rating because PG stands for parental guidance, and I just can't see someone sitting down with little Timmy and saying, yeah, let's watch this fun movie. One of the reasons I never watched Sugarland Express is because I thought it was about a train. Honestly, it sounded like the name, like hijinks on some kind of a cross country train or something. But the Express turns
Well,
out to be
God forgives the Polar Express. Go ahead.
oh, great book. Terrible film. But
Okay.
the Sugarland Express is the line going across states of like 200 cop cars following this other cop car filled with criminals. And I thought about the Blues Brothers, which up until this movie had the most impressive police car pylon that I think I'd ever seen. But this movie, I think back to Spielberg being 24 years old and coordinating all of this. Not only just the beautiful sweeping widescreen shots of these cars, either going on the interstate or in the end when they're pursuing them, they're going towards Mexico, bumping up and down these crazy hills and flipping over and going into ditches. The one Ben Johnson side swiping the news van that's trying to get an interview on the road, and the crew being on top, flipping into a ditch and bodies flying everywhere. It's unbelievable. Even by modern standards of someone who's watched way too many bad action movies, I was still floored by a film that's half a century old at this point.
The news van moment is kind of funny because I guess maybe people always understood that to some degree the news media is always fake and always your enemy, and so they deserve to be pushed off the road into a ditch, perhaps. But that
Come on, the sound guy. I mean, come on.
well, hey, yeah, well, hey, look what his end product turns out to be. But what's interesting, though, to your point, all these images of townspeople and perhaps country folks congregating with their cheering responses to the Poplins. Well, think about what that was the opposite of in the 1970s. It was certainly opposite to campus protest. And again,
Yep.
by presenting a different perspective of how American people uh, respond to public events, it's a rich film for that reason as well. We got a different view of America because that's what road movies are good for, to give us a different perspective on American behavior and American attitudes. And it's also there in the way the townspeople, the country people respond to the Poplins. And then Ben Johnson is one of them, but Ben Johnson is also he's kind of a father figure, but he's also a figure he's a principled man and is a figure of justice as well. And I also enjoy the movie and love the movie for its sense of film history as well, because it's Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson, who had just won an Oscar for The Last Picture Show, where he is also the principled figure in the town. Very beautiful movie. But he's also Ben Johnson from Peckinpah, but really from John Ford cinema. So, by casting Ben Johnson and having Ben Johnson in the role of Captain Tanner, uh, Spielberg is also referencing John Ford, referencing cinema history in a way that makes him part of that American Renaissance period of the 1970s, that makes him a filmmaker to be loved, because he carries with him, when he's good at his best, he carries the history of cinema in the storytelling that he makes, in the films that he makes as well. You talked about the drive-in movie sequence. We can't pass that by. We can't just say that, because that's one of the great moments in Sugarland Express, where Clovis is looking out of the window at the drive-in movie and he's watching a Roadrunner cartoon, which, as you said, forecasts the doom that's coming for all of them. But it's also it's a real cineast moment for Spielberg, because Spielberg is part of that film generation of movie makers who, well, what they learned from the French New Wave is that the history of cinema is something that they have inherited, and something that also inspires them. And they can only enrich their own work, their own storytelling, their own filmmaking by making reference to it, making reference to those great Warner Brothers cartoons. Is the same way that in Breathless, that Godard makes reference to Humphrey Bogart, the way he makes reference to a Western like Westbound. The history of cinema is the history of our culture, and one of the beautiful things about the American Renaissance period that Sugarland Express belongs to is that it brings our culture, our cultural history, our cultural legacy, our cultural heritage to us while telling a contemporary story at the same time. That's what that's my idea of a family movie. Uh, and my lord, if we got away from that, we've lost something.
You know, yes. And this is another one of those classic pictures that I just wonder what happened. I mean, I'm tempted to say when I come across these gems, just put these out. Stop remaking movies. Don't try and, if they tried to remake Sugarland Express, I can only imagine it end up being some socialist nightmare like Snow White was. But just try putting this movie out. Put a $100 million marketing budget behind a re-release of Sugarland Express and just say, folks, this is Steven Spielberg as you've never seen him before. This is William Atherton, the asshole from Ghostbusters, as an anti-hero, someone you want to root for. Be amazed. That would probably never work. But if it can't work, then I want the filmmakers who, to your point, have a real sense of history, not just genre history, like, oh, I'm referencing slashers I saw 20 years ago, but people who really care and understand the language and want to preserve that and amaze new audiences with classic filmmaking. I think that's too much to ask, but I'm going to keep asking for it.
I don't think it's too much at all. I wish it were that way rather than, I mean, you know, to be realistic, I know a lot of people don't go out to the movies anymore. People take cinema as they get it, often through television or streaming. But maybe have a few less television broadcasts of Spider-Man and Marvel movies, and you know, just vary the programming and bring back films like Sugarland Express. Uh, it can only be good. It can only benefit the people who see it.
Make cinema great again. There you go.
There you go. Yes, why not? Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. All right. Well, Armond, I again appreciate you take the time to hang out and talk about this movie. You know, I don't think I don't remember if I read the Sugarland Express essay from Make Spielberg Great Again because I hadn't seen it. But I'm definitely going to do that now that I have and that we've had this discussion. So, folks, again, out there, if this conversation has at all piqued your interest, check out that book. Check out Sugarland Express. Yeah, check out Armand's work at National Review. Is there anything else that you want to promote while we're here, sir?
Well, at the moment, just keep reading me in National Review, and I'll say about the essay in Make Spielberg Great Again. It's the initial review in the piece because it's the first Spielberg piece I ever wrote. So you can read it now as it's kind of the first blush in the collection, and an attempt to try to make sense of a filmmaker that was quite enjoyable at the moment, and then in retrospect, in collating the pieces for the book, realizing that it was a wonderful opportunity to be introduced to a major film artist. So I felt it was necessary to just present that first piece very honestly, and hopefully the inspiration I got from that first movie shows up in the pieces that follow it, and which are about the movies that follow Sugarland Express, which got even better.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, thank you, Armond. Thank you, everybody out there for watching. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, and all that business. Check out Armand's work, which will be linked down below. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much, and take care.
Okay. Thank you, Ian.
Hey, everyone. Ian here. I know, long time no see. But if you like the video you just watched, feel free to subscribe to Kicking the Seat right here, and also check out the playlist and recommended video right here. Thanks for watching.